Jen and I are here to talk about the physiological differences in women. We sent out that newsletter. If you didn't get it, there's a link below where you can sign up for that free newsletter. Jen does an awesome job at those. So a couple of weeks ago, you guys probably remember we talked about, if you didn't watch that, the immune system differences in women and men. And so we're doing a little bit of follow-up, talking about the physiological or biophysiological differences and distinctions for women and why it's important. So Jen, remind me what we kind of like started off with that newsletter, and we can just sort of outline it.
Sure. Yes, we can. So the first part of the newsletter was overlooked reality of design bias, and kind of it just gave a couple examples of kind of the differences in hand span disparities and height. And those were just two, but I'm sure, Sarah, you could do a whole another podcast on the difference.
Yeah, because when you're thinking about biophysiology, there's also subcategories that are nuanced. There's the anatomy, there's the biology, and then those get broken down. And I think I was telling you, I don't want to get too nuanced and break them down, but we'll talk about the anatomy and the physiology and why, and the more important parts of the physiology. There's the hormones, biochemical, which then affects the LHPA axis, which is the nervous system, the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, your metabolic or endocrine system, circulatory, and your immune system. So it'll kind of circle back to what we talked about, a couple weeks ago. So I'll start off first with anatomy, because it's simple. Height, build, joints, ligaments, muscles. But I want to preface that we need to go back to when we were embryos, right? Like we have our DNA, which is made up of our karyotypes, genotypes, phenotypes. So the chromosomes are what determine female and male. If you got two X chromosomes, you're female. If you got, a Y chromosome, you're male. So that's really important to know. That's kind of establishes the base. Your karyotype is the chromosomes. These do not change and cannot be changed. The karyotypes, the chromosomes, influence the others. So it'll influence your genetics. So your genotype. Your genotype is sort of like, show here. It's like an example, right? This person who's born the far left, once you start moving to the left, it's the male, and once you start moving to the right, that's female. And so your karyotypes can influence the aesthetics, basically, how you look, how you morph, based upon your chromosomes. So if you have a Y chromosome, you'll morph a little bit towards the left side, and Y chromosome, a little toward the left side. If you have two X chromosomes, you're going to morph over to the left side. Now, the phenotype and the genotype it can change. It is influenced by your phenotype. Your phenotype will determine, it's like the genetic makeup of how you are predisposed to adapt, modify, change due to your environment. Environment, it could be where you live, the air you're breathing, the soil and the food that you're eating, and types of diet. Do you live by the ocean? Do you live in the mountains? These kinds of things, as well as like health issues, again, come from the genotypes. What are you genetically predisposed to in terms of health? The environment, your phenotype can influence that. And so your karyotype is the XX or the XY, and there's variations in that too. Your genetics is, what you genetically inherited, and the phenotype is how the environment impacts the genotype. Those three become the outcome of the organism. The outcome of the organism of an XX carrying, chromosome carrying organism, female. Their anatomy is not going to change in terms of female male. There's just a certain structural makeup of it. Genetically, they may inherit shorter legs or a certain color of hair, or your build can be genetically inherited by the parent or parents, but that can't change. So here I'll show you just skeletal. These are the differences that you're going to see based upon chromosomes, genetics, etc. Environment can alter bone structure, skeletal structures, but we're going to look at the differences. The male is on the left, female is on the right. And even this image isn't totally accurate because the male pelvis tends to be a bit more heart-shaped, whereas the female pelvis tends to be a little bit more oval-shaped. But anyway, you'll see that male. Do you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to point out, like I like in the newsletter that it's the Q consideration for women too, right?
Yeah, so you can see how from the hip bone, where it attaches into the hip bone down to the knee, there's a bit more of an angle, right? This is why women also tend to have, I think it's 2 times more ankle sprains and broken ankles, is due to this Q angle issue. They also experience 8 times more ACL injuries. So it's important to understand that Q angle, and now, again, depending on genetics, environment, activities, and things like that, some women will have different Q angles, but that is something that is important to consider because they do have more lower limb injuries.
Yeah, and it's interesting to actually see the skeletons beside each other like that, because you can see just even in the pelvis bowl itself that who is trying to have babies.
Right, yes. And the coccyx, that's the lower part of the lumbar spine. It ends sort of like, you can see it in the middle of the female pelvis, that little darker spot right in the middle. That's actually part of the spine. So the coccyx for women is more mobile and movable, whereas the coccyx in men tends to be more straight and cannot be moved, or well, unless there's a very traumatic injury, which goes to, and I'll get back to this too, but this is why in gymnastics you see that male and female gymnasts, anybody who watches the Olympics, will compete in very different events. So there's some they do the same events in, but there are male events that female gymnasts do not do, and there are female events that males do not do. And again, one of those reasons is the coccyx. It does play a part in the mobility, but we'll talk about the flexibility and things like that as well. Shorter joint surfaces, more lax ligaments and flexibility. And even on the Gymnastics Authority website, they note the reasons that they continue to do different male and female event categories is, number one, is the physiological differences. And so males will do the still rings because these require significant upper body strength, which absolutely favors male physiology, as well as the uneven bars. Those, they've evolved to showcase women's flexibility, but then you'll see like things like the horse, the rings, things like that really require strength. It also depends on skill emphasis. So men's gymnastics tends to focus again more on strength and power, while women's gymnastics emphasizes flexibility, balance, and artistry. And think about that for a minute, because that right there, if we're going to get metaphysical on things, really shows the distinctive qualities of the feminine and masculine expression of male and female. It's not just ideology. It does come down to like there's an immeasurable amount of gender expressions, right? But when you boil it down to how you express in a feminine way, in a masculine way, a non-binary way, but feminine and masculine also goes back to your physiology. And you see that in competitive sports and even Olympic sports, and how they divide things up into categories, like the gymnastics organization that says the emphasis on skill is where male events tend to focus on strength and power. Women emphasize flexibility, balance, and artistry. And I think that's really important to think about too, as well. I may offend some people by saying that facts are facts, but anyway. And the apparatus for men and women's events have also been optimized for their respective competitions. So women's uneven bars, you'll see those are a bit shorter, closer together, whereas men uneven bars, they tend to be much higher, things like that. The judging criteria also is sex specific. So those are some things to think about as we move into the physiological differences. There's debate over a lot of these things, and I'll acknowledge that up front. And so if I state something or share something that I feel can be up for debate, I'll acknowledge that. But if I don't, it's because I've been studying this for 15 plus years, analyzing data and research and studies, and I'm constantly looking at all of the follow-ups, the newest studies, the newest research, and I will tell you, based on what we know in terms of science, certain things are just facts that you can't argue. So one of those being that, yes, male and female bodies and anatomy are just different, period. They just are. And that's not to offend anybody, but we see that in general, women are shorter in height. They do have a more narrow shoulder cavity and rib cavity. They have a smaller waist and core angle, but they have a longer torso. So anybody watching this, you may not have noticed that right off the bat, but look at that torso. You can notice it by seeing the spine in the back. There's much more spine that you can view in the woman than in the man. And again, that's evolutionary design. That's for women to be able to carry pregnancies and things like that. They have smaller joint surfaces as well. Look at the comparison between the male and the female knees. Look at those joint surfaces. Again, going back to why women are eight times more prone to ACL injuries. Their glute inhibition in women, knee adduction, medial rotation, and Q angle. This, again, it increases creating femoral introversion and a knee-foot pronation. So you see that at the feet, too. There's more of a pronation there, which, again, could be one of the main leading factors of ankle injuries with women, but I won't even get into wearing high heels. Well, it's another time.
Exactly. And what about the muscular development, the type 1 fiber, type 2 fiber composition, and the torso muscular imbalances?
Right. So when we look at that, the musculature of women is there's more joint laxity, again, by design. This is so women can move and stretch out more during pregnancy. So this can cause a mechanical dysfunction of the shoulders, low back, hips, knees, ankles, feet, etc. So being more lax also creates a hypermobility and flexibility. Again, think about gymnastics. You don't see male gymnasts doing the floor exercises. They have more flexibility, but it also leads to more instability and limited coordination, which increases risk for injury. Females, however, their muscles are favored by their estrogen because the estrogen works to create more fatigue resistant muscles. But when you look at the musculature, so in fast fast twitch muscles. Women or men have, I believe it's 60%, or I might have that backwards. 20% fast twitch. No, it's slow twitch muscle. It's that big, thick muscle, basically. They have 60, on average, 60% larger fast twitch muscle fibers and 20% larger and more density mass fast twitch muscle fibers. So when you think about that, again, it doesn't mean women are less than. It's just sincerely by design, evolutionary. But with the estrogen, women do favor in terms of endurance type sports, muscle recovery, things like that, because they have the estrogen to support that. So I hope I'm not skipping ahead too much, but so we're still in anatomy. So generalized, they're shorter. So in women, 75% of the female population is shorter than 5'6", whereas 89% of the male population is over 5'6". So this is a full study. It's a review of again, musculoskeletal differences in female and male subjects, and it is an average. Right? So on average, 86% of men are taller than 5'6", and on average, 75% of women are shorter than 5'6". So then you want to look at some of the differences here too with the rib cage and the internal organs here. So you are going to see a difference in how the muscle, you're seeing the organs, but the muscles on top of that and the skin tissue and the fascia holds the organs differently. So women have a bit different types of breathing patterns. Their average respiratory rate is a bit higher than a man's, because you look at their chest cavity, men's lungs and heart are just naturally larger. So their CO2 max capacity is larger, but even at rest, it takes less effort to bring in that amount of oxygen and expel than it takes for women. That doesn't mean women are constantly working really hard just to breathe. That's just how our bodies are. So it's important to note that, because when you're looking at generalized averages or statistics on resting heart rate, blood pressure, CO2 capacity, there's a difference between men and women. And so if you see something a little elevated in a female client, female patient, you have to look at it may just be normal. We do have to take in more breath. We do have to work a bit harder. And when I say work a bit harder, it's not in a negative sense. It's just we have smaller lungs and smaller hearts. And that's just how it is. It's also why men have higher levels of hemoglobin and more oxygen in their blood. It's just even at the larger size is pumping it out. Whereas for women, we would have to, to reach that equivalent of a male at rest. So we saw the structural characteristics, the musculoskeletal characteristics. I had my notes in here. I was looking at different. There we go. There's the Q angle. Yeah. So I just want to go back to muscle fiber. It's the type 1 slow twitch. They have roughly 30% more, whereas women have about 70% smaller slow twitch muscle, whereas the fast twitch is 50% smaller, and men have 50% larger. It's 50 to 60%. Men also present much more lower torso to upper torso. Let me bring that photo up again. So lower torso, I'm talking about like the lower abdominals, right? To upper torso. their strength and muscle mass is much more evenly distributed. So you'll see the female torso, so the upper from like the shoulders to the chest cavity down to the abdominal. So let's say abdominal is lower. So lower to upper, it's a very uneven distribution of muscle mass, right? So that's why men tend to have, as well as the wider frame of the shoulder and rib angles, they have more wider so they can carry on much more muscle mass, and that's why they present a much more or greater upper body strength than women. And when you do, there's comparative studies there where men still have a greater advantage in lower body strength, which is their trunk, the legs. But women do start to catch up a little bit when it comes to lower body. Our greatest asset is our lower body strength, our quads, our hamstrings, our glutes. We have not an advantage over men, but we start to close the gap a little bit in terms of strength.
And why is it important though, Sarah, to know that the slow twitch fibers percentages, like what's important about that for people to kind of understand why you're giving those stats?
So one, let's say when we look at standards of care in terms of muscle loss, you're doing DEXA scans, you're training athletes, programs for athletic development, or even just fitness and exercise training, you want to take into consideration that what we're looking at is, if you're looking at development and improvements and reaching goals, you want to look at those that are comparative to female rather than male. And a lot of you go back to, the organization of, we've got what was the name of it is the American College of Sports Medicine, basically. They acknowledge, and this was only 2 years ago, acknowledged that only 3% of exercise science is dedicated or has been female only. So females represent only 3% of exercise science. And what we do know, which again that I share here in this video, is facts. These are the things we do know. So it's really important to characterize your programming, whether it's with a trainer or for a client or a patient, or if you're the patient, to understand these things and why we have such distinctive capabilities. So let's say the muscle mass in the upper body. If you've got women that are training power cleans, anything overhead, you can see, why women's standards in entrance into the military, they lower the standards a bit because women just can't do the pull-ups the way men can, right? It tends to be a smaller number. So they'll bring, instead of your arms, this wide, they bring women's arms in a little bit this wide. I think they used to have them do reverse grip because it's so much easier for women to do reverse grip pull-ups. Again, anatomy and musculature structure and build is what plays into that. So if you're a female watching this, even if you've never done a pull-up before, go try and do a pull-up this way, and then try to do a pull-up this way. And I'll bet my right leg, I'll cut it off.
Don't do
I'll
that.
cut it off and I'll eat it. That you can, it's much easier for you to do this, even if you don't get all the way, right? From here, if you've never done a pull-up before, you're probably going to hardly be able to bend your elbow. And you'll be using more of your back and your neck, right, to do it, because you just don't have the width and the muscle mass in the upper body that men do. So if you're watching men do pull-ups and you're setting a standard of like, oh, this guy reached his goals by doing this, and then you try to assign that to a female, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Same thing with barbell sizes. A Laco, thankfully, is one of the fewer weightlifting equipment companies that has a female barbell, and it's a smaller grip and it's a shorter bar, because when you see a man, for example, I'm backing up, using a bar, right, to do, and the bar is, I think they're usually about 6 feet, sometimes 5.5. They have more of that width to balance
To keep it.
that bar.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if women have a 6-foot bar, they're trying to balance longer length and weight on two sides. So you'll see if women using a regular standard size bar will pull it up here, and they may move to one side to lift it. You'll see that very often, and what that's doing is like they're showing you the inequalities of where they're unstable and muscle imbalances left to right. They're definitely showing you that. But if they're right-handed, you're going to see them tilt up like this. This is my right hand. And if you keep doing that, you're going to train further inequalities and imbalances that will lead to spinal injuries and all kinds of stuff. You don't want to do that. So that's one reason it's really, really important. And in terms of like explosive exercises and strength exercises, we need to understand the standard for women and how to achieve strengthening, hypertrophy type of exercises, and not apply any of our prescriptions in exercise or goals in fitness, whether you're a practitioner or a trainer, based on just standard generalized population. You need to look at the female as a separate category and then break it down as a female in a separate category who is also unique. So, and again, women having smaller joint surfaces and more laxity in their ligaments, and you're trying to fit them into this generalized standard, mostly male, 97% of the information and programs and things out there, books written, everything about exercise physiology, studies male subjects. If you're putting a female with these smaller joints and greater laxity in their ligaments, you're just asking for them to get injured. You're asking for a knee injury. You're asking for a torn hamstring. You're asking for bulging discs, things like that. That is really, really important to understand. If you're a female who's doing these things, these are things you have to be very aware of and understand your body and what it's saying it can and can't do. If you want to get strong, you certainly can. We've seen the CrossFit Games. Like, women can get strong. They certainly can. If you do it based upon how your body works in the female sex category. So,
yeah, it's about a real appreciation for biomechanical diversity, right? And then, like you said before, it's not a standard, it's a universal, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to look at people as individuals. And I think that's just a good coaching practice to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. The sex difference in athletic performance, where endurance and muscular power is required, is roughly about 10 to 30% difference between men and women. So it's just really important to understand that. Past and present studies on athletic performance, acute exercise, and exercise training involve testing more males and females, like I said, that fails to distinguish between the sexes. So the consequence of that is lesser known things about female physiology, and more known about male physiology. So we have to understand and be aware of that when we're going into certain programs, athletic development, training, exercise, that the majority of what we know about it is based on male averages. So it's more important for women to listen to their bodies and be attuned to their bodies and understand that if there's inequalities in your movements, that's really, really, really important to do, because then you're going to train yourself into an injury. And if you're injured, then you can't train. So,
Right.
And if you're a trainer and your client is injured, now you no longer have a client. So it's a financial incentive to understand these things.
Absolutely. And it's a financial commitment for people, like for women to understand that they may need smaller equipment or they need equipment that is size appropriate for them. And I mean,
Mhm.
I can't even tell you how many times I've gone into a gym and felt frustrated by the fact that everything's just so big. And I'm almost 5'10".
You
Like,
are big. Yeah, you're a very tall woman for
I'm
sure.
very tall.
Yes.
Um, but,
Yep.
I learned that at a young age that there was discrepancies, but women, we find our way around it.
Yes.
We find a way to work through it. And yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying men don't, because they do, of course, too. So, well, this has been great, Sarah. Are you so you
Well, there's still a few things such because you're talking about the equipment. That's important because I think
yeah,
I hadn't even talked about that. Everything that we use is based upon average male measurements. So your keyboard, your phone that you hold, the door handle that you use to open the door, the stairs, architecture,
yeah,
like building stair, everything is based upon the average male measurements,
yeah,
and musical instruments and sports equipment and training equipment, exercise equipment. Everything is based on male measurements, and so you think of just handspan, right? The average male handspan is 8.5 to 9 inches,
hmm,
right? And I think it's from here. Whereas the average female handspan is anywhere from 6.5 to 7 inches.
yeah,
And so just like small, like little nuances that don't seem that significant or important is really, really important to think about. It's not
yeah,
that we're straining ourselves and hurting ourselves all the time because we're taking larger steps than a man would on stairs. No, but it does go into looking at things like why are most osteoporosis, why does it affect women more predominantly, arthritis, things like that, injuries in certain areas, why, because our hand span is so different. You look at male female volleyball players, I think it's the average volleyball spike speed for a female is 55 miles an hour, whereas the average spike speed for a male volleyball player is 80 miles an hour. So that's a big difference. And the hand span is that. And then you talk the kill shot, where you slam it down. You have that much more hand, and they're both using the same size ball.
hmm,
So the female hand covers a certain area of the ball where the male hand is covering much more circumference of that ball,
yeah.
and
I've
allows.
always felt that basketball. I've
Yeah,
always
yeah,
felt that in basketball, like the ball was just so big compared to a woman's hand.
yeah, bowling balls, any ball, you're right,
Mhm.
any rackets and hockey sticks, things like that. Those are all male measurements,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the same with tennis serve. I think females average, these are elite athletes, by the way. I think they measured like pro tennis players. Females average 100 to 110 miles an hour, where male average about 120, 125 miles an hour. It
Yeah,
doesn't seem like that much, but when you got a ball flying at you over 100 miles an hour, it's a lot. So I mean,
absolutely.
even 100 to 110 miles an hour, that's impressive. Yeah. But yeah, so that's anatomy. Is like the physiology is part of it all, which goes into the anatomy as well. But this is all part of the differences. Is you've got your autonomic system, which is your organs and how your organs functions and communicate with each other. Your limbic system, which is your central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Um, those behave very distinctively between sexes as well. And you got your hormones, which is the biochemistry, which is the messenger of all the things in between, all the cells, all your mitochondria, everything from the brain on down to every single organ, how you breathe, how fast you're breathing, how fast your heart is beating, whether or not sweat glands are to release sweat, everything that your body does, how it responds or how it behaves and what it's capable of doing and its limitations are being queued up by the differences between the male and female autonomic system, nervous system, and their biochemistry of their hormones. They speak differently. And again, it's all created by those chromosomes, which cannot be
Hmm.
changed, cannot be changed. And so the hormones are going to play a fairly big role. And I'll just very quickly show, like, for a menstruating woman in reproductive years, this is the average of what her hormones are doing throughout the, say, 29 days of her cycle. Some women have 24 days, some have 34 days, but let's just say we're breaking it down to an average of 29 days. This is what her hormone expressions look like. So around day 12 to 14, estrogen is peaking high. And what does estrogen do? Estrogen favors strength and power. It favors muscle recovery. It favors endurance. And so, and it also favors this, the central nervous system as well, because it's what it's helping it to do is in that time where the estrogen is the highest in her cycle, she is able to, multitask. She's more competitive. She's more alert. She's more, focused on task, can concentrate. Her memory is really good. But her nervous system, which women have shorter nerve endings than men. And that's one of a few reasons why women experience pain at higher levels. But when estrogen is really high, and I'll show you again, is also the same time where in the yellow, that's when testosterone in women tends to peak around that time as well. So with estrogen and testosterone being higher, it influences the nervous system to send messages much more quickly. So there's a lot less perceived pain signals during that time for a woman. She also has quicker neurological and neuromuscular reaction times. So exercises like that involve agility, coordination, speed, dynamic type things, jump rope, box jumping, things like that, like she's on point during that part of her cycle. But when you look at the beginning where all the hormones are at its lowest, days 26 to 29 is when estrogen is at its most lowest in a healthy reproductive female. Again, this doesn't really count for women who are taking oral birth control and things like that. It's similar, but not exactly the same. But you're going to have very low estrogen the few days prior to menstruation all the way to, day 5 after menstruation. That their neuromuscular and motor control is suppressed to as much as they can be suppressed throughout their cycle. And so if you've got a woman doing box jumps on day 29, she's going to start her period the next day, or day 3, you're going to have a lot of bloody shins, very likely bloody shins. I'm not saying women can't do box jumps during their period. I advise against it. But I would say reduce the vertical measurement of it, at least. If you want to keep increasing power, you want to keep increasing strength, speed, don't be dumb. Don't get an injury. It's your ego is going to tell you otherwise, but it's not detrimental to reduce your box height. For an example, it doesn't mean you're weak. You're still building muscle. You're still building, through repetition, speed, agility, and strength. But you should probably reduce it. You probably also shouldn't be doing really heavy weight-bearing exercises such as squats. And again, you can do barbell squats, but I wouldn't be maxing out barbell squats towards the, say, day 29 to day 4, because the lumbopelvic motor control in women in studies has shown it is reduced by half.
Whoa.
And what I mean by lumbopelvic motor control, you have your lumbar, your back, right? The back, this is your lumbar, and mirrored back, lumbo, pelvic, right? Motor control. And so when that's the muscles that are talking to each other to create that balance. And when you're going down and you are not activating your lower abdominals because the energy and recruitment is being recruited by the pelvis. It's being recruited by the uterus for the woman who is about to menstruate or is menstruating. So that blood flow and the neuromuscular communication is reduced here. So you're not going to have the lower body to support the low lumbar, and you're going to get a lot of injuries. And so especially if you're doing things like single leg, you know, step ups or lunges, you'll see a lot of women doing that, like they want to keep doing, and they'll and this is an exaggeration, you can see them do very slight, but that's because they don't have the lumbopelvic motor control during that time of their cycle. And again, this is not good for the knees or the joints to be doing this.
Yeah.
This kind of exercise, when you're doing this, is not favorable or supportive or productive in any single way. So I always say it's really important to know that, so that during those times of your cycle to modify, because you can still get stronger. You still have hormones, right? You still have muscles. You can still get stronger, but you're not going to get stronger if you're not modifying it. And that is a huge difference between men and women. It's because women have these cycles within their cycle.
And you're not going to get strong if you're injured.
No. The amount of energy recruitment during certain times of your cycle means that even when you modify it to reduce, you're still equivalent to the energy output on average that you do anytime in your cycle, because it requires more to do the same thing. So yes, you are getting stronger. Yes, you are getting better. You're just not getting hurt. And so you also have to think about how the limbic system plays into these cycles, and how that affects the organs. So again, very quickly, I would say, like, estrogen in women is like your friend who's it's like your alpha ADHD friend. That's estrogen. And then in the turquoise, that's progesterone. Progesterone is like your pothead friend, your friend who's like, just likes to smoke pot and stay home and watch Netflix. And so the progesterone is really important because it counters the estrogen as well. It helps to balance it out. Without the progesterone, women would just be like, like squirrels in traffic all the time. So the progesterone plays a very important role in preventing an over chronic inflammation output due to the estrogen, which at high peak estrogen, women produce more cortisol. And then on top of that, women do excrete more cortisol at higher levels than men, no matter what, no matter where they are in their cycle. And this is a chart I've shown a million times in my talks and presentations, but
so good though.
This is a 24-hour measurement of cortisol releases. On the left is women, and on the right is men. So after a stressful stimulus, you'll see the body excreting cortisol for 24 hours. So for women, it is significantly higher, and it lasts a bit longer. We start to match the male excretion around 5, on the far right, 5 to 7 right there. And so, and so I joke that, like, this is why guys think, or men think women are just like crazy. It's not. It's literally the biophysiology of our bodies are doing something so different than yours. And so when there is a stressful stimulus, we are designed to identify pieces of information and store them, because back in the Neanderthal caveman days, and even the Crusades, men went off to war, men went off to hunt, and when men went off, women were not protected, we were not safe, right? So women had to come together, and that goes to their peripheral nervous system, and the cortisol, the higher levels of cortisol help us store in our memory smells, sights, sounds, sensations that indicate threat. Right, so that was very, very useful back then, because you hear a certain sound, you smell a certain thing, you know there's a threat, and you can prepare, and that's survival. Nowadays, a threat could be like a gorgeous woman walks by, and your boyfriend looks at her, and you're like, you know, she will remember everything the woman was wearing, what day it was, what time it was, what you were talking about at the time, what song was playing in the restaurant when it happened, and all of that. She stores it all, and it's not a conscious thing. It is a biophysiological mechanism of our central and peripheral nervous systems. We can't help it, you guys. We can't help it. So yes, we're crazy, but only in distinguishing compared to men. So you can call it crazy, or you can just call it distinct. But it's also, you know, again, it's why women remember what you said when you promised XYZ on Tuesday, August 9th, and, you know, everything. And so if you're frustrated because she remembers everything, and that's why we naturally excrete higher levels of cortisol, and then mid-cycle with estrogen pushes more cortisol. So without the progesterone to counter that, women could get really sick. So it's really important that even though a woman is performing very peak level during that time, to be sure you're allowing rest intervals and enough rest days in between, because chronic cortisol, as is happening all the time in women, we talked about it, about the differences in the immune system, leads to more inflammation, leads to more autoimmune diseases. More than 80% of autoimmune diseases are women. And so it's just really important to know that when you're doing any kind of training, choosing an activity or a hobby or exercise program and things like that, to understand that your cortisol levels are going to affect your performance in good ways, but it can also affect your metabolic endocrine system long-term in very negative ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know we've covered a whole lot. I'm just taking a pause here because, again, I could just talk about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I know, Sarah, you're so passionate. You've put so much work into this research and studying. You have a wonderful course at the CHEK Institute. That's been, what, for 10, 12 years you've had that there?
Well, I began studying it around 2010 when I was working as the director of exercise performance and programs downtown. I started noticing a lot of, like, over a few months, they're like, where's Jacqueline, and where's Aaron, and where's so-and-so, and they're like, I haven't been able to come for a few weeks, you know, I got hurt, wasn't feeling well. But I never noticed that in the male clients. And so, like, what's going on? Why are women dropping out and ending up injured or sick after these workouts? And I started studying it around then, 2010. Gathered a lot of my information. I wrote a course about it, but I wasn't sure where or how to publish it. And I was talking to Paul CHEK one day, and he saw a lot of my notes on my Blackboard, and he's like, what is that? And we started talking about it. He was like, we need that. So I published it through the CHEK Institute around 2016, and then it went out late 2017. And yeah, it's an amazing course. It gives you, like, all the foundations of sort of everything that we talked about in this video. But it gets, you know, it dives in deeper into what the hormones do, what it looks like when a woman is expressing hormones. You know, we get into, like, the different phases of the cycle and how that affects performance, how to adapt, how to modify, things like that. So early follicular, you need more recovery days, you need more metabolic regeneration. Mid-follicular is more prehab, being, you know, mindful not to overdo. Late follicular, again, there's 3 phases within the first phase of the cycle. That's how much the hormones change and how they express themselves. And there's physiological changes, psychological, cognitive changes, nervous system changes, and the effects on training and exercise. And so we break it down very specifically in the course. And I
Yes,
think,
absolutely. It's a very comprehensive course, really
yeah,
comprehensive, and the coaches have learned a lot from that.
yeah. And, I think it's over 80, high 80s. It's like 88 and 89% of the providers who take that course are male,
Mm,
which is shocking to me, but also I'm like very happy about that. And I've had the most feedback from male students on that. Yeah,
wow. Yeah,
yeah.
that's great, Sarah. I really like that. So, did you want to talk about kind of like office hours and how people can actually come to Bodybuilding Institute and sign up and get information like this with their membership?
Yeah, bodybuilding is our membership platform that we started in 2020, just sort of in response to the pandemic and being able to help more people. We were all stuck inside, but it is evolved to just be able to provide a platform for providers, for coaches, for health enthusiasts, for people who are just learning about these things, to come in and ask questions, get Q&A and peer reviews. You're studying up for a continuing education course. You're doing this program, a trainer wrote you, but you're wanting more information about things. You want to learn more things about your health, about your body, your biomechanics, things like that. We have the office hours where we've got myself and Alex, we've got Jen, we've got other coaches in there, we've got other like experts that are joining office hours every week, every Monday, to just answer any questions you have. It's like being able to have access to anything you want to know about your health, about your fitness, about your biomechanics, about posture, pain conditions, rehab, recovery, nutrition and diet, toxicity and detox, and
And that's just like
that's
the
the tip of the
then you go
iceberg.
into the metaphysical side of it, and
Yes,
then you go
that's
into kind of like the personal development. You guys talk about business development, business strategies. Pretty much anyone that comes in there that has any question is going to get some expert advice on how to
yes.
curate the information for that person.
100%. And you're going to get, experts that have been doing this for a long time. And a lot of them have very distinguishable expertises in certain areas of the thing. And you combine those together and it's like, you don't have to make a doctor's appointment and drive somewhere. You don't have to, make an appointment and pay your trainer or pay your coach for all the time that you get face to face every single week when you have questions and or you're challenged or you're struggled or you're having some digestive issues or you're going through a transition in life. That's the area we call noetic development. So the personal development, spiritual development, consciousness development, all of those things that are supportive for those who are going through certain stages of their life where perspectives are changing, their values are changing, their goals and their dream is changing, and it's helping support that person along that journey psychologically as well as metaphysically, through all of that. And I think it's a component that has to be involved with any journey you're on. If you're just on a weight loss journey, the psychological, emotional, and spiritual component is a necessity. So that's why we have all of that in there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you can take your courses on it. Everything is all
yeah,
there.
you have some wonderful courses in there, but I do want to be very clear with people that are listening to this. It's not just for practitioners. Like
Correct.
we have couples that come into office hours and they discuss kind of what's going on navigating some of their family issues, like or challenges with their children, schools. Sarah brings in her background of her law. Like she's, it's a wealth of knowledge, and then you have
Yeah.
this community around it, like Sarah's saying, where everyone else can kind of give you some other insight and other perspectives and their experience. So it's just genuinely a very great community to come into. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
welcoming, and considerate of, where you are in life, because we're all at different levels. There's no one person that's at the exact same level as another
Mm-hmm.
person. So, don't feel intimidated by the fact that, Sarah is, very intelligent. She's done her work and her research for many years about all these subjects, people come in with just very general questions, and that's fine. People need to
Yeah,
know
and
what they are.
I feel everybody has something to bring to the table in terms of
Absolutely.
experience that provides learning for even the experts are learning all the time. And someone already is where you want to go, no matter who you are, and you have something to offer. And that's why I like building a growing community, because the greater, the bigger the community is, the more you're able to find those who are where you want to be, as well as help those that want to be where you are, make it where you are. And it's just, it creates such a beehive type of network that is just supports your health, it supports your fitness and your strength and your mental, cognitive, spiritual grit and resilience. And it's all encompassing, and I love having a community for that reason. And a lot of the people who are members don't interact or participate as much. I would love it if they did that more, but they still sign on and read through things. You've got search buttons, hashtag searches, you've got videos on there, webinars, courses, downloads, books, everything. The resources, that's my favorite space. You can download, read, or watch pretty much anything in there and have access to that. And we see a lot of our members do that, even though they don't post something, they're using it just to have the resources. And so, if you're shy,
we
you're
have
still welcome.
we have a total coaching program in there as well, for purchase, and yeah, lots of great courses. So we will put that all in the description of this video, and please put any comments or questions you have, and we will get back to you about any of that. And this is a weekly broadcast, so
every Friday.
Yeah, every Friday. Sara and Jen, high noon.
You're gonna have to come up with like a beginning entree.
Yeah. And sign up for the newsletter, and you'll see kind of the newsletter is just as a glimpse of kind of what stuff that we would talk about in office hours. But it'll give you a weekly idea of kind of some of the topics to think about and marinate on and really maybe integrate into your life.
Yeah. We recap office hours every week, what we talked about in office hours, and then we preview every week what we're going to talk about here. So it just kind of gives you the newsletters are great, because a lot of times people read the newsletters and it's their deciding factor of whether they want to join or watch the video that we're going to do Friday, or whether or not they want to follow up and join office hours the following week to kind of elaborate on some of the things. So it's great. Yeah. You can use it to determine your participation or what your information you're looking for, or as an inspiration of topics and concepts to dig deeper into.
And I think that's really important too, Sara, is that the office hour is a lot of times for me, even if I didn't talk to anybody or ask a question, it was just feeling the inspiration of someone else getting the knowledge that they really needed to hear, and that's going to help transform and, evolve their life.
Yeah, and we've got the chapters, and we've got the scripts of everything. So even if you don't have time to watch it all, you can just click to the chapter you want, of the topic of the thing you want to hear about or learn, and then and so it's really tailored to everybody. So we welcome everybody. We hope to see you on bodybuilding. If not, we'll see you next Friday, hopefully.
Super.
All right. Talk to you soon.